Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Shmuley Show. Today, we have a jam-packed show for you that is so relevant, and it's going to frickin' blow your mind with dynamite of thought and fact. First of all, a CNN poll finds that 65% of Americans are against the war. Is that fake news, and does it matter? Secondly, do you know that Australia is now banning all Iranians from the country? Not because it fears they're terrorists, I would understand that, but it fears that innocent Iranians are going to ask for asylum. Is that moral? God, and my wife's Australian, it matters to me. Third, the Israeli army is really short of manpower. I know that personally because I have 4 kids, 3 children, and my daughter-in-law, she's my daughter as well, who serve in the IDF. Should religious people go to the army? By the way, it affects us Americans as well. There's no draft here. We rely entirely on a volunteer draft. I'm also looking at if the Trump peace deal actually fails, should there be an American invasion? I saw that Babylon Bee yesterday was joking that Trump is not putting boots on the ground because they're switching all American soldiers into wearing, sandals. So it's not actually boots. We got so much to talk about, and it's great to have you. First of all, my friends, so 65% of Americans are opposed to this war, according to CNN. First of all, CNN is fake news. I don't just say that as a cliche. They skew liberal, progressive left. That's okay. That's what we mean by fake news. In that sense, some of what Fox is saying is also fake news because they skew conservative, etc. The middle is dead in America, so it's hard to get like real news. But do I believe that it's probably divided more 50-50, half of Americans supporting the war in Iran, half of them not support? I think that's probably more accurate, even if it skews a bit more opposed, 55%. The question is, does it matter? Well, the United States is a democracy, so of course the people's will matters. But we elect presidents for 4 years, and there's a reason for that. It's to give them time to build an agenda. It's to give them time to actually get things done without having. Why do we have presidents at all? Let's just vote on everything every day. Let's you and I vote on whether there should be a budget deal in Congress to refund the TSA if it means giving up on the Voter Registration Act. Let's vote for it now, not through our congressmen and not through our senators. Let's vote right now that we should go on Iran. That's not democracy, that's chaos. The idea of giving people a 2-year stint in Congress and senators a 6-year stint, a much longer term, and presidents a 4-year term. Listen, in France, presidents get a 6-year term. The idea is give them time to build an agenda. Does it matter that, say, 55% of Americans are opposed to the war? No, right now it doesn't matter. I'll tell you why. Because most of Americans, much larger numbers, 80%, were opposed to Franklin Delano Roosevelt getting involved in the Second World War. Roosevelt had to fight the American people, and he was super popular. And even with all of his popularity, he could not bring the American people to see the threat of Hitler. If the United States had begun bombing Hitler along with France and England in 1935, when he began to rearm and build tens of thousands of tanks, tens of thousands of aircraft, with which he would use his blitzkrieg against Poland on the 1st of September 1939 and against Western Europe in the summer of 1940. If we had bombed him in 1935 just for the violations, because Germany had agreed not to have more than a certain number of soldiers after the Treaty of Versailles, we would have prevented the Second World War. We would have prevented the Holocaust. We would have prevented 450,000 American soldiers dying in the Second World War. If we had bombed Japan when they began to threaten us, how did the Second World War come about? America saw that Japan was taking over China, all the atrocities in China, the atrocities in Manchuria. America should have bombed them then. When they were weak, we waited until they grew. Until so many American soldiers died in Iwo Jima, Corregidor, the Philippines. The reason why those of you who oppose me are opposing what I'm saying is that you're not looking at the Second World War. You're looking at the Vietnam War. You're looking at the Iraq War. You're looking at the Afghanistan War. I get it. We shouldn't only look at one war. The trick is to learn lessons from our failed wars. Superpowers like America are always going to be involved in some kind of military action. I'll tell you why, because there's so much evil in the world. Only when the Messiah comes, for the Christians, it'll be the second coming of Christ. For us Jews, it'll be the first coming of our King Messiah. For Muslims, they also await a special day of peace and judgment. Muslims, not Islamists, they're killers, but my Muslim brothers and sisters who look to Islam for peace and for harmony. There's a superpower like America is always going to be involved in military action. Don't think it won't. Don't think we don't need a military. We Americans rely completely on a voluntary military. We have about 2 million men and women under arms. It's entirely voluntary. If, God forbid, we were at war, we might have to go to a draft, as we did in the Second World War, as we did in Vietnam. I don't want to see a draft. I don't want to see any war. But don't think for one moment that there's never going to be any future wars until we root out evil from the world. And I'm not sure we can yet root out evil from the hearts of man. You're always going to have, when the mullahs go down, there's going to be some other threat, sadly. We all know that. But right now we have to deal with the evil of the mullahs. Does it matter that 50% of Americans don't see how dangerous an atomic bomb is, a nuclear bomb is to New York or Washington? It doesn't matter. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. It matters that President Trump sees it. It matters that the United States Senate sees it. It matters that hopefully people like me who are trying to influence your opinions, not change your opinions. I always say that. I want you to think. I don't want you to agree with me. All the ditto heads, I don't need you. I don't want your clicks. All the people who just say, Shmuley, you're right, you're right. If you don't have a freaking brain, if you want to watch me purely for entertainment, it's a free country, do it. But you're not my primary audience. My primary audience are people who are a bit skeptical about me, or they're not sure, or they kind of agree with me, but not fully. I want you to think. So the 50% of Americans who are, say, against this war, you're wrong. You're wrong because we can have a nuclear holocaust in the United States if we don't stop Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. If you don't see that, then you are blind. And the only thing that matters, and that's what I love about Trump. Trump has said repeatedly to the media, I'm going to make this decision. Yeah, we elected you president by a plurality of the American people for 4 years. And if he screws it up, well, he can't run again anyway. But MAGA will be a dead movement if he screws it up. If he succeeds, there'll be another MAGA president. If the GOP screws everything up, the Democrats will take over. A lot of it will happen in the midterms. If they do well, the American people will decide. But right now, I don't care that 50% of Americans don't see the danger of Iran. I don't care that 50% of Americans don't see the danger of Iran. You're blind. I'm sorry. 50% of Americans don't see, I don't know, 10, 20% of them don't see that smoking is killing them. Except cigars. You don't inhale. 50% of Americans don't see, 20% of Americans don't see that obesity is killing them. 10% of us Americans probably don't even know, God forbid, that cancer is growing inside of us. You know that 1 out of 8 women get breast cancer? They don't even know it. It's terrible. We don't get screened enough. Now, comparing that to the war in Iran, 50% of Americans are just going into this with eyes wide shut. How could you not see that Iran is a threat to America, not based on future projections, but based on past actions? They have killed tens of thousands of Americans already. They promise to do more. They just don't have the capability. A nuclear weapon will give them that capability. You all say this is about Israel. Even if it were all about Israel, even if Iran had never attacked American soldiers or taken American prisoners hostage in 1979, even if the whole thing was that there's only one democracy in the Middle East and Iran wants to destroy that because it doesn't want any freedom, it wants Sharia law, even that would be almost reason enough perhaps to go into the region. I'll tell you why, because we learned from Hitler. It starts in one country, in Poland. The dumb Russians, stupid Stalin, thought that he could make some kind of agreement with Hitler. You know, in the first year of Hitler's invasion of Russia, which started on June 22nd, 1941, you know, Hitler almost won the war in 4 months. If not for the fact that early autumnal rains had come into Russia and made the mud so heavy that the panzers, the German tanks, couldn't move, Hitler would have taken over Moscow. Do you know that Stalin went into such a panic that he was catatonic for 3 weeks? They had lost. The Germans took 3 million Russian prisoners in the first 4 months of the war. 3 million in the first 4 months. Russia was done. It was General Winter that defended Russia. And a lot of bravery on the part of the Red Army, I have to admit, in their final counteroffensive from Moscow, where they pushed them. But they couldn't hold Leningrad. The Russians were in siege in Leningrad for 4 years. Because dumb Stalin didn't even see the evil of Hitler. Dumb Stalin thought that dictators could get along. What an idiot. And 25 million Russians died because of his blindness. But he was an animal. God works in his mysterious ways. Why he would have used someone as evil as Stalin to defeat someone even much more evil than Hitler. Isn't it amazing that Stalin is the one that ends up liberating Auschwitz? Wow, God works in mysterious ways. He'll always have my gratitude. That doesn't excuse the fact that he killed 30 million people. But here's my point. Stalin didn't see the evil of Nazi Germany. Dumb Chamberlain didn't see the evil of Nazi Germany because it wasn't going to affect Britain. Chamberlain saw it affects Czechoslovakia. It doesn't affect me. Hitler wants the Sudetenland. Hitler wants Prague. Okay, we'll give it to him. Peace in our time. That one of the most infamous clips in news history after the Munich conference, where Chamberlain, who was a very smart man, you can't call him a buffoon, but a coward, a weakling, comes back, and on the airfield in Britain, he waves a worthless piece of paper, piece of our time, peace in our time. Is that what you want Trump to do? Peace in our time. The mullahs said they're not going to enrich uranium. We're not going to enforce it. They don't let us. They're not going to let any inspectors in. Peace in our time. Would you respect Trump if he did that, if he was Chamberlain? If Trump came back with a promise from the Ayatollahs, we're no longer going to build missiles. Would you respect Trump if he said, they're not going to build missiles? They gave me their word. Like Chamberlain said, I believe that Herr Hitler, he said, is a man of his word. A British prime minister said that. Neville Chamberlain said, I believe that Herr Hitler is a man of his word. And no greater stupidity with more greater catastrophic results have ever been uttered by a statesman in world history. So Trump doesn't have to listen to you, the 50%, who don't have his foresight and vision to stop Iran from getting thermonuclear weapons that could take out whole cities. I am amazed at you, the 50% who don't see the evil of Iran. I'm amazed. If you say about Vietnam, Vietnam was about this domino theory that if the communists take over one country, it'd go to another country, and maybe that was true at the time. Was the war worth it? It all comes by the outcome. No, we didn't win that war, and we lost South Vietnam. But how can you compare that to Iraq, to Iran? The Vietnamese weren't blowing up American soldiers all over the world. The Vietnamese were turning communist. America was very scared, but they weren't already killing Americans. How could you compare it to Saddam Hussein? It wasn't blowing up American cities, blowing up American. He was an evil man, terribly evil man. I'm glad he's dead. But the Iraq war and the Afghani war, the Afghanistan war was necessary. We had to fight it. The Iraq war more questionable. We had to fight it because we saw the consequences. Afghanistan harbored Osama bin Laden. He was given 10 years to plan 9/11, unless some of you Dudger heads out there who think the earth is flat still believe it was an inside job. We talked about that the other day. I'm looking at one of my producers right now. I hope he's smiling. He's not smiling. Oh, I got a smile out of him. No, I got a smirk. I got a smirk out of him. For all of you who believe that, a 9/11 was an inside job, I can't help you. I tried. If you heard the show, hopefully I convinced you. I did give you the respect of taking all of my viewers who think it was an inside job. I gave you the respect of responding logically, factually to it. But we had to fight in Afghanistan. We all knew that. We just fought so badly. I mean, the soldiers were so courageous. We made such bad political decisions. But there was no choice. How do you not fight in Afghanistan when they're harboring Osama bin Laden so he can attack America? 3,000 Americans dead. No one's going to dispute we had to go to war after 9/11. If you think we didn't have to go to war after 9/11, then you're saying America, why even have a military? Then let's just rely on people's good, kindness and nature. But Iran has killed more than 3,000 people, Americans, already. Iran is building a nuclear device. This is not the weapons of mass destruction with Saddam Hussein, which ultimately they did not find. Although we know he wanted a nuclear weapon. Israel's the one that destroyed it in 1982, Oziraq. That's indisputable. Menachem Begin took the courageous decision that was condemned by his ally Ronald Reagan at the time. America condemned Israel in 1982 for their act of aggression. And they stopped selling arms to Israel, put a boycott on Israel for a certain amount of time because they blew up Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor at Oziraq, but they were building a nuclear weapon. Israel stopped it. So Saddam was planning for weapons of mass destruction. It's just that Israel stopped it 10 years before America went in, or even 20 years before America went in 2003. But with Iran, we know they're centrifuges. We know Natanz. We know Fordo. We know all the nuclear sites. They don't even freaking deny it anymore. They're not even playing games with us anymore. So the 50% of Americans who don't get it, I'm sorry you don't get it. Read a history book. Take any of these damn books. Read the history of the Second World War, where a true fanatic, and that's who Iran is. When the Hitlers of our time are building a nuclear bomb, you stop them before they can use it. And if you don't get it, too bad. Then I'm sorry. I blame you for your ignorance and your lack of vision. Do I like war? I hate war. I said the other day, there is no good war. You know, in life, there's only three things, and I know this is a child of divorce. Divorce is never good. Divorce is very often bad, but it is sometimes necessary. Let me reintroduce that concept. There is not the good and the bad in the world. There is good, bad, necessary. Good, bad, essential. So, is chemotherapy good? No. Chemotherapy is horrible. You're destroying so many good blood cells. People lose their hair, makes their immune system fall apart. Chemotherapy is never good. It is often bad to a lot of the body, but it's necessary. If you have cancer, you have to have chemotherapy. You wouldn't call it good. If you have a cancer in the Middle East, is war good? Never. Is war bad? Often. Is war essential? Tragically, yes. This war is essential. Not for heroism, not for glory. I don't want to see ticker tape parades. I don't need generals to emerge, even though they should be recognized. Our great heroes are fighting men. They should get their medals and all those things, but that's not why they're fighting. I'm not looking for glory. I'm looking for America not to be nuked. It's that simple. And for those of you who think, oh, we're never going to be nuked, then you're stupid. I'm sorry, you don't know history. It's like Neville Chamberlain thinking Hitler's never going to attack in Europe. But Hitler was an ideologue, and war was endemic to his belief system. He was an evolutionary sociologist. He believed in evolution, that there's a master race and then there's lower races. And I, the Jew, I'm the bottom of the pole. But if you're watching and you're black, you were only slightly higher. If you're gay, you were only slightly higher than the Jew. If you're Slav, you were slightly higher. You weren't born for freedom, you were born for enslavement, but not for gassing. But the Jews were born for extermination. Evolutionary psychology, that there's a master race, limited resources, and these is only survival of the fittest. And that's what these mullahs believe. There's Muslims, they're at the top, and Shia Muslims, even the Sunni can die, or at least be slaves to the Shia. And the American infidel, the women who wear, bikini at the beach, they have to die first. Iran will kill them first. They're already killing women that are showing so much less hair, let alone their breasts. There's an evolutionary psychology to the mullahs of Iran. And they're showing it, and they're doing it. And if you don't see it, wake the F up. Wake up. Now, I have sons at war. I cannot tell you how hard it is to have sons at war. It was a cliche, that I read about as I grew up. So many American parents who had to live with their sons going to Vietnam. That was my generation. I was born 66. By the time I was old enough to understand, mid-70s, the war essentially was over in Vietnam. But I knew the trauma of parents, kids who didn't come home, of course, God forbid, Gold Star families, but even, parents who didn't know the fate of children who did come home safely. But for the 2-3 months that you can't speak to them now, the sons at war, I get to speak to them when they have a phone or have service or allowed a phone. When they go into very dangerous missions, they obviously don't carry phones. They can be tracked. God knows other reasons. They can't have phones, obviously. I can't tell you the hell of it. But am I proud of my sons for protecting Israel and democracy and freedom and women and Muslim Israeli citizens and Christian Israeli citizens and LGBTQ Palestinians who would be killed by Hamas or by Hezbollah? I'm so proud of them. But Israel doesn't have enough soldiers. Now, America has 2 million soldiers out of a population of 300. Less than 1% of Americans go to the military. It's all, and they're all freaking heroes. They're amazing. But Israel has a manpower shortage. And one of the main reasons is that Orthodox Jews like myself don't go to the army. Now, I didn't go to the army because I'm an American and it was a different trajectory. I never moved to Israel. I love Israel. I fight for Israel, but I never moved to Israel. But I have 3 children who moved to Israel, and they all went to the army, even though they're Orthodox. Now, about 10% of Israel is ultra-Orthodox. 20% are Orthodox. So about 1/5 of Israelis are Orthodox. That means that they don't drive on the Sabbath, they keep kosher, etc. Half of them go to the army. The other half, the ultra-Orthodox, for the most part, don't go. They have to start going. Now, Yair Lapid, who I know, he was Israel's prime minister for just 4 or 5 months, but I'm friendly with him. Interestingly, I know him through the root of relationships. His wife, like me, is a writer on relationships, and she and I have done a few public lectures together speaking about sexuality and marriage and divorce and intimacy and all those things. Her name is Lee. She's an incredible woman. Now, I'm very close to Bibi Netanyahu. I'm less on the side politically of Yair Lapid, but I completely agreed with Yair Lapid, where he said just today, He said that without the ultra-Orthodox being finally drafted and serving in the IDF, Israel, God forbid, can be cooked. And I see it with my son. My son has been called up now. So I have one son who was in the army 3.5 years straight during this war because he was in his 20s. My older son is in his early 30s. He's being drafted. Do you know he's been drafted now like 30 times since October 7th? That means he can't have, forget about the risk and the danger, which is considerable, which freaks me out, okay? It makes me pray to God and tremble. But I'm talking about he can't date. He can't work. He can't be in his own apartment. He can't eat decent food. He can't have community and friendships. He has his band of brothers who he fights with, and I'm so proud of him. But his whole life is disrupted. Now imagine, and my son is not married with kids. Imagine all these guys, his unit are lawyers and dentists, and they're elite fighters, and they have to suddenly leave their civilian life behind. I got to tell you, to those of you who follow what's happening in Israel, the fact that the ultra-Orthodox are not serving, it's a sin against the Torah. It's a sin against God. It's unacceptable. I said the other day that for the first 1,000 years of Christianity didn't believe in war at all. They basically adopted the misunderstood quotation from Jesus that love your enemy. And the misquotation from Jesus, or the misunderstanding of the quotation of Jesus, that if someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn him the other cheek. Notice that Jesus says, love your enemies. Jesus never said love God's enemies. You know who your enemy is? Like, who are my enemies? My enemy are my producers staring right at me. They fight with me constantly. They're always telling me that I suck at broadcasting. Why don't I let them go in the chair and broadcast instead of me? Why, oh my God, they wish they had gotten a better host. Those are my enemies. One of them is like looking down at his computer right now because he knows it. He's giving it away. Those are my enemies. My producers are my enemies because they fight me every day. But they're not God's enemies. They haven't offended God. Your enemy is the guy that takes your parking space. Your enemy is the guy who cut the line in front of you at the TSA line. That's your enemy. And Jesus says, okay, the guy's a bit of an a-hole, but forgive him. But do you think that Jesus said you should love God's enemies? Hitler isn't your enemy. Hitler's God's enemy. Ayatollah Khamenei wasn't your enemy. He's God's enemy. He hates God's children. He slaughtered God's children. That's why Jesus said, love your enemy. Not God's enemy. Your enemy is the guy that got your promotion at work that you worked so hard for, and you think that he got it because he sucked up to someone. That's your enemy. And Jesus says, overlook it, man. Come on, have a little bit of love. It's petty. Okay, it's not so petty. He's going to earn a lot more money, but still have a little bit of love. But you think Jesus says if someone rapes your wife, you should love him? You think Jesus, God forbid, was a moron or an imbecile? Jesus, look, for me, Jesus was a great Jew and a great rabbi. He's not God and he wasn't the Messiah. I wish he were the Messiah and he never would have been divine. You could be a messianic king and it's not heresy according to Judaism. It's just that a man cannot be God. That's the heresy for us Jews, the divinity of Jesus, not the potential messiahship of Jesus, which could have happened had he defeated the Romans and all that. But sadly, the Romans murdered him because he fought like a lion for his people and he was killed by the Romans for it. But Jesus says, if someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other cheek. But he says, look, if someone insults you, like I get insulted. Every day I wake up to a tsunami of hatred. Every day. I mean, I'm talking, this morning, honestly, I woke up, I think, to about 800 messages on Instagram that I should die, I should be killed, that God forbid my whole family should be killed. Everyone knows I have soldiers at war. God forbid something should happen to them. I don't respond. I turn the other cheek to them, not because they even deserve it, because screw them. I got no time for them. But when Jesus said turn the other cheek, he meant like, okay, if someone ribs you at a cocktail party, or if you fight with your wife, or if you fight with your husband, they say something, turn the other cheek. Don't make the fight worse. But you think Jesus meant that if someone breaks into your house in the middle of the night and rapes your wife, you should give him your daughter too? Do you think that Jesus was a moral imbecile? So for the first 1,000, God forbid, for the first 1,000 years, Christianity took all this stuff to such an extreme that it said there's no moral war at all. And you know what happens when you go to one extreme? You end up in the other extreme. So Christianity went from let's not fight any wars at all to let's kill all the Jews in the Crusades on the way to fight the infidel in Jerusalem. The first thing they did when they wanted to dislodge the Muslims in the first crusade in 1095, the first thing they did is all along the Mainz River Valley was perpetrate a Holocaust. That was the first Holocaust in Germany. They killed 90% of all Jews in Germany, 90%. Then they did it again in the year 1142 in the Second Crusade. Because when you go to one dumb extreme, there should be no war. You end up at the opposite extreme. There should be total war and kill everybody. The golden middle path is for people in general, and religious people in particular, to believe that there are, like I said, no good wars. Mostly are bad wars, but there are some moral wars, necessary wars, justifiable wars. And the religious and the Orthodox have to go to the army in Israel. I'm amazed that Australia is banning all Iranians from coming to its country, not because it thinks they're terrorists, but it's because Australia fears that they are going to ask to stay. Let me repeat that. They're afraid they're going to ask for asylum. I used to love Australia. I was one of the 10 founders of the first rabbinical academy in Sydney, Australia's history. And ever since then, and I married in Australia, my wife Debbie from Sydney, I visited Australia 100 times more, lived there for 2 years. Australia is going down the toilet. First of all, there was all the incitement against Jews that led to the massacre on Bondi Beach on Hanukkah. I want to give you an idea of how bad that was. There was incitement against Jews for 2 years. On October 8th, 2023, the day after the October 7th massacre, you had thousands of Islamists who gathered at the most famous structure in the entire Southern Hemisphere, the Sydney Opera House, and they literally and openly chanted that all Jews should be gassed. And the police didn't make one arrest. Oh, I'm wrong. They made one arrest. There was one, I know him, a Christian pastor who was born Jewish, who walked by wearing an Israeli flag, and they arrested him for incitement. You can't make this stuff up. So the incitement against the Jews was so bad until the Jews were slaughtered. It was inevitable. Australian police weren't even protecting them. You know, there were 1,000 Jews at Bondi Beach that day. There were 3 cops to protect them. With all the incitement, there were 3 cops to protect them. After 400,000 people had marched across the Harbor Bridge, chanting that Jews are genocidal and Jews are Nazis and they had 3 cops to protect them. But now that Australia has gone like full bore, and by the way, we're not even going to allow Iranians that want to escape the person. So Australia won't fight in this war, even though they could be nuked, God forbid, or terrorists can kill Australians from Iran. They won't fight in the war. They won't give their air force to the war. They won't join the United States as an ally in the war. They fought so bravely in the First World War and paid a terrible price at Gallipoli. There's that movie that made Mel Gibson ultimately, sadly, to become an anti-Semite, but that's what made him a star. Gallipoli. The Australians, the Anzac Corps, fought so bravely in the Gallipoli, and they fought so bravely at El Alamein in the Second World War under Field Marshal Montgomery. They were so brave in this, and then the Australians fought alongside Americans in Afghanistan. The Australians fought alongside the United States in Iraq, and now Australia under this disgusting Prime Minister Albanese, who's an Islamist. He's been an Islamist since he was in college. His maiden speech as an MP, when he was a backbencher MP, well before he could even conceive of becoming prime minister, was an attack on Israel and calling Israel an apartheid state. He's always been an Islamist. So he won't join in the war against Iran, but he won't even allow Iranians that want to live to come into the country. By the way, Australia's got like 33 million people. It's the size of the United States. It is completely empty in its middle. Aside from a couple of towns that I visited, I love the Australian outback. It's hot as hell. God, Alice Springs, where we went to, or Uluru, the famous, what's also called Ayers Rock, one of the hottest places. I think when I was there, it was like 122 degrees. I've never experienced such heat in my entire life. We went in the summer. That's January, February in Australia. But I've also been in the winter, where it's much more pleasant. It's gorgeous. But the whole middle of Australia is empty. You wouldn't allow some Iranians who are peaceful. I'm talking Iranians who want to integrate in the West. I'm not talking about Islamists that want to come and chant death to the Jews, death to Israel. I'm talking about Muslims who are Westernized, who don't see a contradiction between Western values. Women can dress how they want. People can choose their sexual orientation how they want. They can criticize the government if they want. People who want to integrate, Australia won't let them in. And that's a real disappointment. Australia is changing so much. It's a country I used to so love and respect. And I have to admit, I'm losing that respect. I'm losing it. I used to do so much TV in Australia. I was like the relationship guy, the relationship expert for Channel 9 morning news with Tracy Grimshaw, who was like the Katie Couric of she was the host of the Today Show. I used to do it from the Reuters studio. I would do it live whenever I was in Australia, but I used to do it from the Reuters studio in Times Square. I became very famous in Australia through my multiple media appearances, and I loved Australia. And I did tons and tons of media appearances, lectures. Thousands of people would come to hear me. Now, aside from visiting my in-laws, who I love, they live, and they're getting older, Debbie's parents, who I love them so much, I don't even feel much of a compulsion to go and visit. I'm losing respect for the country, and this latest story just augments it. And I have to tell you that it is therefore the responsibility of President Trump to begin to really know who America's friends are and who our friends are not. Sadly, Australia is proving it is not a friend to the United States if it cannot join in this war for civilization and against barbarity in Iran. Under Albanese, Australia is not our friend. Other former, they're called liberal, the conservatives, strangely enough, in Australia, the conservatives are called the Liberal Party. Several liberal prime ministers have said the same thing. Australia is no longer being a friend of the United States under Albanese. President Trump needs to take a hard look at who our friends are and who are not. Israel is our friend, fighting alongside the United States against a country that says America is the great Satan, that took American hostages, that blew up American Marines, etc. Israel is a friend. Is France a friend? They don't give one damn that America's fighting this war. The UAE is a friend. Even Saudi Arabia is proving itself a friend. Not enough, they're not fighting. MBS should be sending its troops. But is England a friend under Keir Starmer? No, it's not. I'm sorry, it's not. You speak about a special relationship, England? What special relationship? You won't even join us in this war? You are crumbling the NATO alliance. And that's why President Trump knows it's imperative that the United States and Israel, who are fighting this war completely alone against barbarity for the benefit of world civilization, President Trump's peace deal has got to be something that has at least the 3 points. No nuclear enrichment whatsoever, and the total dismantling of the entire nuclear project and destruction of every last centrifuge, period. Iran doesn't need nuclear energy. It's an oil superpower. It's an energy superpower. They're only doing this to build a weapon. Number 2, no more missiles. Number 3, they give up all control of the Strait of Hormuz. Those 3 objectives. Should Trump be threatening a ground invasion? Well, a smart man in business said to me, never make a threat that you're not prepared to carry out. So if Trump does threaten a ground invasion, he's actually going to have to at least potentially carry out a ground invasion. But I'm a realist. I just don't see that the American people are ready for a ground invasion and boots on the ground. Maybe on Corbel Island. And there is a difference in taking over one island versus a massive ground invasion of an entire country. Maybe that island that will give America the strategic depth to stop any threat to the Straits of Hormuz and the control of of exporting Iranian oil, which is going to Russia, which is going to China, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. On all of the Iranian clients, most of which, unfortunately, the majority are like evil or semi-evil governments. Pakistan is a big recipient. They're not so bad, but they can in one day become very bad. They have nuclear weapons. A lot of Islamists, God forbid, might take over that country. So maybe Corbel Island. But should Trump be threatening a massive ground invasion? No, because I don't think the threat's going to be credible, because I don't think that he wants it, and I don't think the American people want it. But to threaten to continue bombing indefinitely, yes, we have an amazing Air Force. So far, thank God, in terms of casualties, every American soldier that dies is one too many, of course. They're our greatest heroes. But we've lost about 13 soldiers in this 1-month war. We have to continue to bomb them and bomb them. So I don't think he should be threatening an invasion, because I don't think it's going to be taken credibly or seriously. But threatening to continue to bomb the living daylights out of them, especially until until Iran has lost every last missile launcher, definitely. Absolutely. So ground invasion of some of the smaller islands that control access to the Strait of Hormuz, yes, I do believe in American troops on the ground for there. I think we might even need permanent bases there. We have a permanent base in Qatar that hates our guts. We have 10,000 airmen there in the Air Force. We have permanent bases all over the Middle East. Why not on these islands outside Iran? Because you're going to say, oh, Iran will go to war. Let them try. Let them try to retake this. They'll never succeed. Even they would need ships, even to go that short distance, or planes to bring their soldiers. America will blow them out of the water and blow them out of the sky. But to threaten a ground invasion, it's not going to happen. I just don't see it. But that doesn't mean that we cannot continue to bomb the hell out of them until the conclusion of this war. Now, I'm going to end with an appeal to all of you. The most influential medium in the world today is the internet. I remember when the internet first started. I knew about it before almost all of you did. I'll tell you why. I was a rabbi at Oxford University. The internet was really a research tool built by American scientific government agencies. Actually, before that, it was a military thing, but then the scientists could use it. I remember probably in 1988, maybe 1989, I remember an Australian scientist who was studying at Oxford, and his wife worked with me. And I remember he said, come to my lab, I want to show you. And he showed me these pictures of NASA that were accessible only on the internet. And I finally discovered this thing called the internet. Within 3 or 4 months, I had an email address. No one had email addresses back then. You had to be an academic, and you could only go to a terminal inside. So Oxford, American universities had it. You had to go to a library to have an email address. Then Sprint introduced Sprint Mail. It went through all these. But from the 1988, I knew about the internet. Now, how many years ago was that now? It'll be 40 years in 2 years. So we're at 38 years. That it's become the single most influential medium in world history. It is to our world, and even much more, what Gutenberg's printing press was when it was first invented, and the Gutenberg Bible. How did Martin Luther bring about the Reformation? How did one priest in Germany dismantle half the Catholic Church? Answer: he wasn't just writing, things on paper. He had a printing press. If you don't marry Luther's writings to the printing press, and Luther ultimately became one of the worst anti-Semites in history, saying that synagogues should be burnt down, screw him. But if you don't marry, but many of his criticisms of the church, especially indulgences, were absolutely correct. Indulgences were disgusting. What, you give the church money to build bishops' palaces, and then your brother gets out of hell, get out of hell free card? It was an obscenity. It's a shame he became such a terrible anti-Semite and said the synagogue should be burned to the ground. And the Nazis, of course, drew upon Martin Luther's writings. But Luther became so successful because he wrote pamphlets, but they were then printed. He was lucky to have that new technology be available to him. That's what we have today. And this is my appeal to you. The internet's becoming a hellscape and a sewer. It is just filled with hatred. It's filled with people who are ignorant. It's filled with people who are hateful. It's filled with people who are racist. And it's especially filled with people who are anti-Semitic. If you don't allow your voice to be broadcast, I'm not saying you should start a podcast. I'm saying like and watch and support the right people. If we are going to allow the haters to overtake one of the greatest inventions in human history, we're all screwed. You see, like when America built the atomic bomb with Robert Oppenheimer in Los Alamos, New Mexico, ultimately, it was used to end the war in Japan. We debate till today whether this was the only way to end the war in Japan, or whether 1 million Marines should have died storming the beaches of the Japanese islands themselves. That's a fair debate. What's not a fair debate is whether or not the atomic bomb ended the war, because the Japanese surrendered 2 days after Nagasaki. So the atomic bomb achieved its objective of ending the war. And I believe it ultimately saved millions of lives amidst the horrors it created of taking about 100,000 lives instantly in Hiroshima, about 75,000 lives instantly in Nagasaki 2 days later. But we can debate that. We can't debate the outcome. The atomic bombs ultimately ended war. We might even be able to say that responsible countries having nuclear weapons has stopped a full-scale world war, because there has been a world war, because everybody knows, mutual assured destruction. Why did the Soviet Union and the United States go to war? They came very close. Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, John F. Kennedy, mostly because everyone knew you can't win a nuclear war. So nuclear weapons can have a moral purpose, or at least the threat of them being used, God forbid, can have a moral purpose. I'm not endorsing nuclear weapons. I'm just showing you how it might be able to prevent war, and probably has prevented war through mutual assured destruction, that philosophy. But then nuclear weapons can be used for the worst thing, like Iran getting one, or a terrorist organization getting one, then we're all screwed, okay? The internet's the same thing. It's either going to be used all for porn and destroy marriages, degrade women, make it impossible for men to focus on their wives, destroy sex in order to create only masturbation. Let me just be clear without doing too much of an aside on this. Porn is not about sex. Porn is about the absence of sex. Porn is about removing sex to get straight to climax. You know, the French call the orgasm le petit mort, the little death. A lot of men use orgasm to fall asleep at night, as not as an aphrodisiac to create attraction or romance, but actually as a sleeping pill. It's like a narcotic. They want to skip sex to get to orgasm. So the internet will either be used for porn, it'll either be used to promote people like Candace Owens, who hate the black community, the Jewish community, gays, everybody, especially Jews, wants us all dead. That's why I call her Candace Ovens. Candace, she hates the black community almost as much as she hates Jews. Ovens is where she wants the Jews to go. We'll either use the internet to promote Tucker Carlson, who was dead after Fox News, and now he's come back to life as one of the great liars, fabricators, ignoramuses, and Jew haters of all time on the internet. We'll either use it for Andrew Tate to degrade women, put down women. We'll either use it for, I heard he made a statement today, but I'm not going to talk about him, Dan No Balzerian, disgusting pig and a coward. I call him No Balzerian because he agreed to debate me and then he pulled out because he's afraid of me. And then he said, I wanted to do an MMA fight against you instead. And I said, you know, Dan, you're whatever, 30-something. I'm 59. I'm not that tall. Do I admit that in an MMA fight you could kick my ass? Absolutely. Do you admit that in a debate I would digitally decapitate you and expose what an utter ignoramus you are and embarrass you with your low IQ? Please do admit that. And if you don't admit it, let's do the debate. Maybe you even have a high IQ, to be honest, but you've abused your brain that it's become mush. But we're either going to use the internet to promote porn, hatred, anti-Semitism, white supremacy, Islamism. The Islamists are all over. People like Mohammed Hijab discuss, what does he have, 20 million followers? This guy that I debated on Piers Morgan, most disgusting reptilian anti-Semite, one of the worst I ever met. We're either going to use the internet for a godly purpose, or we're going to use it to allow this crap to metastasize, this cancer to grow, this tumor to grow, and it's going to come down to you. Let's stop giving Candace so much attention. She doesn't deserve it. She's not even interesting. She's a one-trick pony. How many times, even if you're an anti-Semite, okay, so you're indulging it through Candace, but don't you get bored after a while, or is your hatred so insidious that it doesn't even bore you? You just hate Jews so much. I mean, maybe that's the case. But for those of you who are more borderline, you don't know if you should hate Jews or not, but you're listening to Tucker and you say, oh, Israel's taking all of America's money and Jews want to control Wall Street and the world and all that. Maybe try something new. Maybe try to make sure that this printing press that Gutenberg invented in the 16th century, that this internet, the new printing press that we've invented in modern times, beginning about 40 years ago, again, military and scientific use even earlier, but public use about 40 years, maybe we can actually use it for a godly, blessed purpose. Maybe we're capable. But it's going to come down to who you promote. You guys are giving people like Candace and Tucker, you're giving them what, 20, 30 million likes a day, really? That would mean that if America's 330 million people, then I have to guess that 10% are anti-Semites, about 30 million people. That's sad. Do I think 1% of Americans are anti-Semites, about 3 million? Probably. If it's 10%, it's really high. If it's a third, we're finished. We're screwed. And we've lost all American idealism. If one half of Americans, for example, how many white Americans hate blacks? If it's 1%, 3 million, that's probably true. If it's 2%, 6 million, wow, we're getting screwed. If it's 10%, 30 million, let's all vomit together. But if it's a third, if 100 million Americans hate blacks and are racist, we are finished. And the same thing is true of anti-Semitism. Make all of these shows into a blessing, not a curse. God bless you guys.